He's obsessed with me. He's going to any means possible to destroy my life and our lives.
Why?
To shift blame on somebody else. If you look at it, Fox News, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ted Cruz, Gates, they're all telling us before this thing that it was stolen. So you tell me, who has more impact on people, them or me?
Epps, once a loyal Fox News watcher, told us he doesn't understand how he got cast as the villain. The Epps version is more mundane. They believed the 2020 election had been stolen from Donald Trump and considered January 6th a legitimate protest.
It was a sloppy election. And then to top that off, you have talking heads reporting that there's problems with the voting machines and different things like that. The election's stolen. So yeah, we had concerns. I wanted to be there. I wanted to witness this with my own eyes.
That was last night's 60 Minutes sit-down conversation with Ray Epps, a former professional basketball player who attended the January 6th riot at the Capitol, who later became the center of right-wing ideas about what might have happened, that he perhaps was planted by the FBI to egg on supporters of President Trump. Here's what Epps had to say about that theory that he gave marching orders to January 6 rioters.
As closely as you can remember, what exactly did you say to him?
Dude, we're not here for that. The police aren't the enemy, something like that.
Did anyone from the federal government direct you to be here at the Peace Circle at this time?
No.
No one from the FBI?
No.
Your old comrades with the Oath Keepers?
No.
I think what is so damning about the video is that there's a barrier there. The barrier gets knocked down, and a police officer, a female police officer, gets knocked down. And the mob, including you, walk over the barrier and march on toward the Capitol. Why didn't you stop to help this police officer who was knocked over?
When she was knocked down, and I started to go towards her to help her up, and I saw a billy club over here in the corner of my eye, and I thought, you know, they're going to think I'm part of this.
And finally, here's what 60 Minutes showed of Epps talking with fellow protesters and rioters in the run-up to January 6th.
Put it out there. I'm probably going to go to jail for it, okay? Tomorrow, we need to go into the Capitol. Into the Capitol. What? No! Peacefully. Fed.
To some in the crowd, Epps seemed so over the top, he must have been a government agent, a Fed sent to entrap them.
So this is an interesting story with a lot of dynamics. Now, to be clear, there's no evidence. No one has presented any evidence that Ray Epps was an informant for the FBI or national law enforcement and was, trying to egg on protesters to enter the Capitol because he was taking orders from the federal government. That's the idea coming from some conservative people. It's just an idea. There isn't any evidence of it at all. He was involved. He had a history with the Arizona Oath Keepers, and we do have plenty of examples of people who are part of militia-type groups having had contact with the FBI, being paid informants of the FBI. The Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, kidnapping thing actually did end up being a situation where the supposed kidnappers were substantially motivated by directions from law enforcement. Law enforcement was paying them, in some cases, to move forward with the plan so that they could arrest other participants. So it is not a crazy idea to think that could be possible. Law enforcement has massive infiltration into the kinds of right-wing groups that were present at the Capitol. And you see him making those claims. And actually, the other protesters suspect he's a Fed because he's inducing them to commit trespassing. And actually, serial attendees of right-wing gatherings, they know. Their podcast people are always saying, like, if someone is telling you to do something illegal, that person's a Fed. Like it's kind of like a running joke now. So that's all the case. So he was interviewed on 60 Minutes. There's a big 60 Minutes piece about Ray Epps. And I do think it's interesting that he has become a very sympathetic figure for media people. There's been a lot of New York Times reporting on him and the harassment he's faced, and that he had to close down his shop. There's not a lot of sympathy for people involved in January 6th in general from the mainstream media. There's a lot of make sure we get them all, lock them all up. And he is just, because he's part of this right-wing theory, it's like the media has adopted him as he was the good January 6th guy. He didn't go in.
Wait a minute.
And he's seen the light, and he knows that now the election wasn't stolen.
Let's take a few steps back. The reason that the evidence, you're right, there is no real evidence, but the soft evidence, the circumstantial evidence that some conservatives have pointed to that Ray Epps was a Fed was him getting some lighter treatment in terms of the criminal consequences of having participated in the insurrection.
Now, to be clear, he didn't go into the Capitol.
Right,
so.
and that has been the pushback. Well, it's in line with what his actual behaviors are. But I think the core conceit is this. The core question is, why has Epps been the focus of, I think someone said something like 20 Tucker Carlson segments? It seems to be, from an independent, outsider's perspective, an effort to characterize Epps, whatever you think of him, as the driving force, a major driving force behind the insurrection, whatever you want to call the events of 1/6, and the choice to enter the Capitol unlawfully, in a way that seems to deflect blame from Donald Trump, who for weeks was talking about Stop the Steal, encouraging people to go rally down by the Capitol, who said any number of statements that he ultimately, there was an impeachment hearing over, but regardless of whether you think he should have been impeached or anything like that, at the end of the day, the idea that one guy in a crowd has more responsibility and is being focused on more by the conservative media as instigating what happened on 1/6 than the President of the United States, who created the whole Stop This Steal phenomenon to begin with, was lying about mismanagement of voting machines and a stolen election and telling people to amass in exactly the way that they did. That is what people object to, and I think that is why some liberals have decided to rally behind Epps, not because they like a former oath keeper, but because they're pushing back against the effort to shift responsibility from Donald Trump as president of the United States at the time to some random guy in the crowd. Right.
Now, to be clear, he did, Epps texted his nephew as the riot was happening, saying that he was the mastermind and he was bragging or gloating about his involvement. Right, you could say that was, and what he said subsequently is he regrets saying that, and it was just a boast, it was not true. He attempted to portray himself up until it became clear that there would be criminal repercussions for people entering the Capitol. He attempted to spin himself as someone very involved and like a leader of the effort here to defend Trump and push back on what they all described as a stolen election, which is not the case. It's not a stolen election. So I mean, if you when you tell people that you're the guy and you're very involved and you're orchestrating it and you're in charge, a lot of them are going to believe you. And it is certainly not crazy to think that someone inducing right-wing people to commit a crime like trespassing, who has been in the Oath Keepers, which is particularly a militia group that has had a lot of involvement with law enforcement over the years. None of that is crazy. Now, like I said, there is actually no evidence, and I don't find the evidence that he was not charged very. Some people on the right have said, well, that's that he was not charged. That's the evidence. But he didn't actually go into the Capitol. It sounds like other people at his level involvement have also not been charged. Yeah, so I'm not persuaded by that. But also, to what purpose? Let's say that Epps was a Fed and was standing there and was cheering everybody on. Okay. Does the fact that there was one... No. But in terms of what the broader implication of people focusing... As far as... I think many liberals would be happy to lock him up, throw away the key. Who cares? The fundamental issue, I think, for folks who are defending Epps, as it were, isn't because they like Epps or they think he makes Republicans look bad. It's whether or not he is being weaponized to deflect the ultimate responsibility of Donald Trump. If he was a Fed, that doesn't change that Donald Trump lied about the election results, told people to protest, and contributed to the toxic mix that ultimately led to people going into 1/6. Do we think that Epps standing there by himself
outside of the Capitol or going on Twitter saying we got to rally, we got to riot at the Capitol would have had the impact, the outcome of 1/6, but for Donald Trump.
Well,
that's the fundamental issue.
I don't think I agree with that. I think
that Donald Trump, that Epps alone could have created a riot at the Capitol from just tweeting from his solitary Twitter account.
Again, there's no evidence that there is, but you said, let's do the thought experiment. If Epps and a few others are all FBI people with like instructions to cause a riot, I mean, yeah, it looked to me, I was there, I was covering it, it looked to me like a kind of spontaneous thing where the people at the front of the pack started smashing windows. They were being goaded to do that.
Why were people there?
Obviously they were there, but Trump didn't specifically say to do anything criminal or smashy. I think I have, on the show many times, blamed him for stoking the fires by saying a lot of things that were not true. But look, if the proximate cause is there people being paid by the FBI doing immediate goading of people to commit criminal trespassing and to smash windows, no, I think that would be a huge deal.
Something of which there's no evidence for. There's
okay, right.
no
Well,
evidence
you just said
for
to do
it.
the thought experiment.
But no, there's
no evidence.
No, but that's
sure.
the problem. There's no evidence for it, and yet Tucker Carlson has done dozens of segments on this guy, trying to create the perception that this is where the blame lies, and not on Donald Trump. Now, I'm not going to sit here. Look, Black Lives Matter protests, some of them have done things that I wouldn't support. Some of them have done things that I would support. Some of those things are property violence that I think is maybe more connected to the problem of that they're trying to address, like what they did to the police station in Minneapolis, which was overwhelmingly supported by the public at the time. And some of it seems more frivolous and not well tethered to advancing their political goals. But because I find out that in one instance, 2 instances, 3 instances, it's an op and it's the feds trying to make Black Lives Matter look bad, I'm going to say the entire movement isn't about what it is, or that people aren't acting on their own volition in large part. If I sat here and tried to pretend that the feds being involved in one case it invalidates everything that's ever been done in the name of Black Lives Matter across the world, it would be deeply suspicious. And people would say, oh, look, here goes Black Lives Matter trying to offshore responsibility for what has happened. That's exactly what's happening here. But instead of an entire movement, it's one guy who's being spoken of, and more accountability put on his shoulders than the President of the United States of America.
Okay, this is, again, an if, because there's no evidence, but if the riots and the looting and burning of Targets and such were being done by Black Lives Matter activists because there were feds among them saying we're going to, that would be a huge deal. Yeah, huge deal. That would redirect culpability from the organization or the activists to the federal government, as would in this case.
If there were evidence for that, and if in the absence of evidence, every single news report was simply, oh, it wasn't our fault. We think it's feds. We think it's feds. We think it's feds.
Yeah.
Then it would be obvious what the media rationale for that would be, what the political rationale for doing that would be. So all I'm looking at, and what Democrats are trying to say, is that the political rationale for Tucker Carlson doing 20-odd segments on Epps, and I don't know how many he's ever done about Donald Trump in 1/6. I'm not going to make any claims about that. But the perception is, what has been identified is an effort to focus on him. And this is what Epps said in the clip. How am I the one that's responsible for 1/6 when Donald Trump is right there? That's the core issue. And if there was some more acknowledgement of Donald Trump's role in this, I don't think that anybody would really care what happens. I mean, from a left perspective, a liberal perspective, I don't think they're invested in Epps beyond that he is being scapegoated for what ultimately was Donald Trump's responsibility.
Well, okay, but he's being scapegoated under the assumption that he is not a Fed, which there's no evidence. So fine. But if that were to change, then I would feel differently about it. But we got to see some evidence of that. And I agree with you that so far no one in the right-wing media orbit has made the case, and there's some not so convincing stuff out there. But we will continue to follow this with great interest, and we'll have more Rising in just a minute.